Hey guys, tonight we slip into the side streets of Harlem, where the air still hums with an old rhythm. Car stereos rattling windows, voices rising from bodegas, and the faint, stubborn echo of a name that never learned to stay buried. Alpo Martinez. It's the late 1980s, and Harlem doesn't sleep. It prowls. Neon lights flicker against brick walls. Sneaker soles slap the pavement, and everyone's looking over their shoulder, but only a few wear that fear like velvet. And Alpo, he glides. He's got the kind of confidence that makes streetlights pause, like he was born under a marquee sign, bright letters spelling trouble with charm. You'll hear a lot of stories tonight, some true, some stretched, and some, well, they make you wonder why anyone thinks ghosts are silent. Alpo's legend? It talks. And in Harlem, talking too much can kill you faster than bullets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Let me know in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Oh, he walks like he owns the sidewalk. Not rented, owned. Teenaged Alberto Alpo. Martinez isn't tall, but the way his head bobs to his own internal beat gives the illusion of height, of power, or something that smells like it. His starter jacket gleams under Harlem's streetlights, gold chain swinging in rhythm with his laugh. There's always a laugh. Loud. Too loud. That's how people remember him. The guy who turned crime into a performance and punishment into a pitch. He's already done with school. Not officially, but spiritually. He still shows up sometimes. Washington Career and Technical Education High School. But he's not there for the books. He's scouting. The hallway corners whisper business, pills, joints, the basics, a launch pad. Teachers sigh when they see him. Some shake their heads. One even warns him, "You're gonna end up either dead or in jail, kid." Alpo just grins, because that's what they always say, right? Most kids his age run from the idea of danger. He winks at it, maybe buys it a soda. In fact, what makes Alpo different is his ability to make risk feel like a lifestyle brand. When other kids are practicing jump shots, he's learning how to read faces. When others dream of college, he's watching who shows up late to the block and why. And Harlem? Harlem is his classroom. By 13, he's got routines, roots, rules. He never carries too much, never lingers too long, and he knows who not to look in the eye. He's not the biggest, but he's fast, quick with his mouth, quicker with his plans. That dirt bike he rides through the avenues, it's not just for show, it's practice, for slipping away when the sirens come close. He's got role models, sure, but they don't wear robes or read Shakespeare. They drive 560 SELs and wear leather like armor. Some are dead before 25, and Alpo doesn't flinch when they go. He learns from their exits, stores it away like a notebook you never let anyone see. One block over, the real game begins. The crack era is booming, reshaping Harlem's spine. Basements turn to labs, and front steps become stock exchanges. Kids barely old enough to vote are walking around with shoeboxes full of money and sidearms tucked where backpacks used to hang. And in that chaos, Alpo begins his rise. At first, he runs errands. Nothing glamorous. Drop this, hold that. Don't ask questions. But he's watching, always watching. And more importantly, listening, because the thing no one tells you, the streets don't reward the loud, they reward the observant. The loud ones get noticed. The observant ones take over. And then, when Alpo talks, he talks big. Talk is how he sells. Talk is how he climbs. And soon, Harlem knows his name, not because of what he did, but how many people said he might have done it. You can feel the street tilt in his favor when he's around. By the time he's 16, Alpo's no longer just a runner. He's a manager, a rep, a minor celebrity. His outfits change, flashier, sharper. He starts borrowing the shine from older hustlers, the ones who have already paid dues, and reflects it back with something fresh, younger, hungrier. People start using words like charismatic and unpredictable. He likes that second one more. And yet, there's something else beneath that cocky surface. A question. Did he understand the weight of where this road was heading? Probably, but it didn't matter, because like many before him, he figured he'd be the exception, the one who beats the math, the one who doesn't end up in the obituary column or whispering names into a federal mic. Spoiler alert, he'd be wrong, but we're not there yet. Tonight, he's still just a kid with a knack for rhythm, riding his dirt bike through Harlem like he owns it. Some say they saw him that day near 124th, popping a wheelie between traffic lights, laughing loud, gold chain bouncing against his neck. The whole block watched him glide and thought the same thing. That boy's gonna be somebody, just not the kind you want to meet at a four-way stop in the dead of night. He's barely out of his teens when the money starts talking back. At first, it murmurs, crumpled bills from hand-to-hand deals in stairwells, corners, payphones. Then it starts shouting, wads wrapped in rubber bands, stacks buried in timberlands, envelopes traded like greetings. And Alpo listens. Oh, does he listen? Not because he's greedy, though that certainly helps, but because he understands the math of ego. The bigger the pile, the louder the name. His name, Alpo Martinez. Just the sound of it rolls off tongues with a mix of envy and warning. By now, he's got his own team. Boys younger than him, some barely shaving, each one loyal because they're paid to be and terrified not to be. They move in silence, but behind them, his name moves like a siren song. It's Harlem, 1986. Crack is currency. Violence is punctuation. And the streets, they're crowded with contenders. But Alpo moves different. He's not the kind of dealer who posts up on a stoop all day. No, he's mobile, flashy. He wears his empire like jewelry. He starts popping wheelies again. Not just on dirt bikes, but on reality itself. He treats Harlem like a racetrack. If the cops chase him, he laughs. If a rival stares too long, he smiles like they've already lost. His rides are loud, painted candy colors, gliding through neighborhoods like heat signatures on wheels. And the product? Top tier. Or at least that's what the corners whisper. You see, for Alpo, this isn't just about cash. It's marketing, presentation. He sells a fantasy. Be like Alpo. Sharp fade, Cuban link, money fanned out in Polaroids. That's the dream. And like any good salesman, he knows dreams don't come cheap. But Harlem isn't just watching, it's reacting. The old heads start grumbling. Kid's too loud. Too fast. Won't last. But even they know better than to say it to his face. Because for all the noise Alpo makes, he's got silence on speed dial. A nod here, a look there, and someone disappears for a while. Or forever. Behind all the bravado, though, there's calculation. He knows who to bribe, who to avoid, who to charm. He's part performer, part predator. That rare breed of street figure who turns chaos into choreography. But he's not alone. Enter Rich Porter. If Alpo's charisma is gasoline, Rich is the match. the two don't just become partners, they become legends. Where Alpo is theatrical, Rich is smooth. Where Alpo shows off, Rich reassures. And together, they turn Harlem into a gold mine. Rich has connections, uncles, cousins, a pipeline that drips with product and credibility. Alpo brings the flash, the speed, the volume. Together, they form a brand. The streets call it power. The cops call it target number one. Their empire grows fast. Too fast. Whole blocks are under their thumb. The kind of influence that once took decades to build now blooms in months. And everyone sees it, including rivals, including the feds. But for now, the money flows, the phones ring, and Alpo's pockets are always heavy, a mainstream fact worth noting. In 1986, at the height of the crack epidemic, Harlem's underground economy rivaled the legitimate one. Some estimates claimed millions moved weekly through street-level deals, and at the center of it all were boys like Alpo, young, ruthless, and seemingly untouchable. But that illusion is short-lived, because when you move that much product, when you drive cars that glitter like disco balls, someone's going to want what you have. Or worse, they'll want you out of the picture. Still, Alpo doesn't flinch. He buys more bikes, more outfits. He throws money at problems and smiles at storms. To the public, he's bulletproof. And to those who whisper otherwise, he just turns up the volume. One moment sticks out from this era. One of those stories that rides shotgun with his legacy. Word spread that Alpo once jumped his dirt bike onto the hood of a cop car during a chase, laughed, and vanished down a back alley before they could blink. Whether true or not doesn't matter. The legend sells better than the truth. But here's the thing many people still think about. If Alpo had stayed low, played smart, and moved quiet, could he have survived the storm? Or was he always doomed by his own love of being seen? So what do you think? Because as we drift deeper into this story, one thing becomes clear. It's not just the drugs that kill, it's the spotlight. And Alpo, he's addicted to it. If Harlem had yearbooks, Alpo's would read, most likely to be watched. Not just by cops, but by everyone. Corner kids, store owners, tired mothers leaning out of windows with a cigarette and suspicion. He's a spectacle, a walking contradiction. Street smart, but reckless. Calculated but impulsive. Loyal until it becomes inconvenient. But before the betrayal, before the bullets and courtrooms, he's just a kid with charm that wraps around you like a gold chain. And it starts early. Let's rewind. Long before he's the face on posters, the name in rap lyrics, the ghost on YouTube documentaries, Alberto is a boy. Just a boy. Puerto Rican roots. Grew up in East Harlem, 112th Street. Spanish spoken behind closed doors. English sharpened on sidewalks. His mother, tired, protective, maybe too much, maybe not enough. Depends on who you ask. He's got energy, more than most classrooms can handle. Teachers remember him as the kid who always had a side hustle, not just candy. We're talking supply and demand. One teacher, reportedly, once confiscated 5 packs of gum, 2 joints, and an entire cassette tape distribution scheme, all in one day. Legend? Maybe. But with Alpo, the line between exaggeration and autobiography is always paper thin. He picks up codes young, not written ones, spoken, silent, street taught. Eye contact, timing, posture, when to joke, when to disappear. These aren't things you learn from textbooks. These are survival tools. In Harlem, they're currency. And speaking of currency, his first taste of profit is electric. It's not the money. It's the reaction. That moment when someone hands over a few bills and walks away, satisfied. It hooks him like a magician's first trick. Not the trick itself, but the applause. You see, the thing closest to Alpo's core, he craves recognition. Always has. That's what sets him apart. Many dealers hustle for comfort. Alpo hustles for witnesses. By junior high, he's more ghost than student. He shows up late or not at all. He's got better things to do. His social circle shifts from classmates to corner boys, from cafeterias to bodegas, from comic books to counting scales, but there's still a kid underneath. One story that floats around says he once skipped a drop to take a girl to the movies. She remembers he showed up in a red bomber jacket, flashed a smile, and bought every snack in the concession stand like a rapper at a Grammy party. She thought it was charming. Later, she heard rumors about what he did with that same jacket the following week. Something about blood. Something about silence. Nobody ever confirmed it. In the midst of this early climb, one of Alpo's strongest traits begins to emerge. His ability to recruit. He doesn't just attract followers, he inspires them. Kids want to ride with him not just for the cash, but because he makes them feel like they matter. That's a rare skill, and it's dangerous, because if you build loyalty too fast, it burns hot, and fast fires go out just as quick. Still, in these early days, the loyalty seems unbreakable. He creates a small army of runners and watchers. He teaches them how to avoid cops, how to blend, how to charm. He's not just a boss. He's a coach with street drills. And it works. By the time he's 17, Alpo's name carries weight. Not heavy like fear, heavy like fame. The kind that walks into rooms before you do. The kind that makes people clear a path. But fame comes with footprints. The more people know your name, the easier it is to trace it. And the NYPD? They're starting to follow those prints. Still, no arrests, no handcuffs, not yet. Instead, he moves like a shadow with teeth. He walks into parties like he owns the sound system. He flashes cash like it's casual. And behind closed doors, he starts whispering to bigger players. Older men, OGs, names with real reach. They see something in him. Not just ambition, but hunger wrapped in silk. The kind of hunger that can swallow a city. But hunger has a cost. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1980s, New York's war on drugs had ramped up to full throttle. Operation Pressure Point had flooded neighborhoods with police. Arrests soared. Street crews were splintering. Yet somehow, Alpo kept climbing. It was like he knew when to duck and when to pose. But many people still think that if someone had stepped in, really stepped in, and shown him a different model, maybe things would have gone another way. Then again, maybe not. So what do you think? By now, Alpo has crossed a line he can't uncross. He's not just playing the game, he's reshaping it. He's making the streets louder, bolder. The older generation sees it and sighs. The younger ones, they follow. And in that shifting tide, Alpo smiles. Because when the rules feel flimsy, charm becomes law. And he's got enough charm to rewrite Harlem's street code. Rich Porter isn't just a business move. He's a moment, a pivot point. A face Alpo sees and instantly knows. We could run this whole place. They meet through mutual streets, mutual ambition. Harlem's a neighborhood, sure, but it's also an ecosystem. And in ecosystems, the dominant predators often sniff each other out before anyone else can. Rich is the smooth talker, the gentleman dealer, tight fades, fitted jeans, that quiet confidence like he's always 5 minutes ahead of the next problem. Alpo is fire, Rich is ice. Together, they steamroll everything in their path. Their partnership isn't just lucrative, it's cinematic. Think late-night strategy sessions in parked cars, coordinated drops like clockwork, custom jackets, dirt bikes lined up like cavalry, young lieutenants guarding street corners like medieval watchmen. To Harlem, they're not just hustlers, they're stars. Word spreads quickly. Rich and Alpo, like a brand, like a warning. Rich brings family ties. Old heads trust him. He's got an uncle named Johnny, who's deep in the business, with plugs that stretch from New York to Philadelphia. That pipeline, solid, untouched. Alpo brings the flair, the charisma. He can flip a whole block with one story and a promise. If Rich is distribution, Alpo is advertising. Together, they turn street deals into a business model with frightening efficiency. Their territory expands rapidly, 125th to 145th, from St. Nicholas to Lexington. Each block a kingdom, and their profits? Astronomical. Thousands turn to tens of thousands, then more. One week, they make more money than some folks will see in a decade, and they're barely 20. It's not just drugs, it's presence. They throw parties that rival nightclubs, show up to clubs in outfits that look like magazine shoots. And the girls? They come in waves, not just for the money, but the mythology. That's Alpo and Rich, they whisper, like saying the names might earn them some of the shine. But here's the thing no one wants to admit. It's too perfect. Too fast, too big, too loud. Even the streets know that kind of rise comes with a timer ticking beneath it. Still, for now, the boys are golden. Alpo's favorite car becomes a legend in itself. A cherry red Toyota with tinted windows and a stereo that thumps so hard it shakes stoop railings. When he pulls up, heads turn, conversations stop, and the neighborhood holds its breath. He leans out the window like a movie villain who doesn't care that the third act is coming. And Rich plays it cooler. He still dresses sharp, but he keeps his mouth tighter. He knows too many people, has too much to lose. He's got a little brother, William, who follows him like a shadow. You can see Rich soften around the kid, protective, always watching his back. That tenderness, it's rare, especially in this world, which makes what's coming all the more tragic. Historical anchor here. In 1987, Harlem was one of the most profitable drug corridors in New York City. Federal agents estimated that teenage dealers like Rich and Alpo were clearing 6 figures monthly. The money brought power. And power? It brought enemies. Inside their empire, cracks begin to show. Some say it's ego. Some say it's greed. Others claim Alpo starts feeling that Rich is holding out on him. That maybe the profit split isn't quite 50-50. The truth? No one really knows. And in stories like these, knowing doesn't save anyone. But many people still think that had the two just stayed aligned, had they kept ego out of it, they could have gone down in history as Harlem's most untouchable duo. So what do you think? Were they doomed by success or by each other? As tensions brew beneath the surface, Alpo grows more restless. The streets feed on rumor, and Alpo never liked feeling second best. He's hearing whispers, seeing signs. Maybe Rich is making moves without him. Maybe there's a betrayal coming, or maybe it's just paranoia creeping in. The kind that wraps around your thoughts and won't let go. And while Rich remains calm, steady, focused on long-term moves, Alpo starts playing chess with a flamethrower. One night, they ride together, windows down, music up. No words, just tension. Even the air between them feels off. They're not kids anymore. They're bosses. And bosses don't always make good friends. You remember the way they met. 2 kings in waiting. You'll remember the way it ends too. But for now, they're still laughing, still planning, still telling the world that nothing can touch them. Not yet. Money doesn't just change people. It rearranges the room they stand in. And in Harlem, late 1980s, money is changing everything. Blocks shift hands, kids swap morals for margins, and people once close enough to hug now speak in clipped phrases and cautious smiles. For Alpo and Rich, success becomes a tightrope. Every move is amplified, every silence suspicious. And the empire they've built, fast, loud, golden, is starting to crack along lines no one wants to acknowledge. It's subtle at first. Alpo starts showing up later to meetings. He doesn't call ahead. Sometimes he doesn't come at all. When he does, he talks louder, smiles wider, buys flashier toys. But his eyes, they're scanning, always scanning. And behind them, something buzzes, an anxiety that feels like an engine running too hot under the hood. Meanwhile, Rich focuses on operations, keeps his corners tight, his people loyal. He's not into the stunts or the extra noise. He's thinking about scaling, about longevity. He talks about stepping back, investing. Alpo listens, nods even, but his grin says otherwise, because Alpo's in love with the fire. The faster it burns, the brighter he feels. And that difference, that friction, starts to shape the air between them. One night, they're riding in Alpo's favorite whip. Music thumps low. The windows fog from the cold outside. Rich asks a question. Just business. Something about a drop, a payment. Alpo doesn't answer right away. He just stares out the windshield and says, "You think I don't know?" Rich blinks. "Know what?" Alpo smiles. But not the charming kind. The kind you don't want to see from a man who knows where your family lives. Nothing more is said. But from that night, something changes. Trust phrase like an old shoelace. Then comes the moment that hits Harlem like a thunderclap. The disappearance of William Porter, Rich's younger brother. He's just a kid. 14, smart, bright smile. Everyone knows him. And one day, he vanishes. No ransom call, no clue, just gone. The neighborhood goes silent. Mothers start locking doors earlier. Boys stop hanging on certain corners. Rich is crushed, not just emotionally. He's destabilized. His moves become erratic. His eyes look hollow. And Alpo shows up less and less. Some say he offered help. Others say he stayed away, didn't want to get involved. But those close to the situation, those who really knew the streets, noticed something else. Alpo stopped smiling, a historical fact worth threading in. In December of 1989, William Porter was found dead. His body was discovered in the Bronx. The event sent shockwaves through Harlem and marked a turning point in Rich Porter's spiral, and, indirectly, Alpo's future decisions. Because after William's death, something broke that couldn't be glued back. Rich grows distant. Alpo grows colder. And Harlem watches, waiting for the inevitable split. And it comes, not with shouting, not with gunfire, but with a series of closed-door conversations that nobody outside will ever hear. Deals shift. Loyalties wobble. And one name starts appearing less often in the same breath as the other. Rich and Alpo? Not anymore. But here's the thing many people still think about. Was William's death the final wedge? Or just an excuse to do what Alpo had already decided? So what do you think? Because it's easy to blame the tragedy. Harder to admit that ambition needs no trigger, only timing. Still, no one expects what happens next, not even Rich. But Alpo is already staring at a future where there's no room for equals, just opportunity and execution. And the first sign of betrayal is often silence, the kind that arrives before dawn, when the streets are still. And trust starts to feel like a loaded question. They say when betrayal comes, it doesn't knock. It lets itself in with a key you handed over months ago. Alpo's key to Rich was trust. Mutual rides, late-night laughs, a shared kingdom of concrete and profit. But somewhere along the line, that key turned cold. It started opening doors Alpo never meant to revisit. Doors labeled jealousy, insecurity. What if? So now he rides alone. One night, Alpo climbs into a van. A smooth ride, quiet interior. There's a driver up front, tight-lipped. In the back, Rich Porter. Tired eyes, cool expression. No raised voices, no wild accusations. Just two men in a cramped space. Years of friendship folding into silence. And in that silence, something breaks. Nobody knows exactly what was said. Not the exact words. But many believe it was a short conversation. Tense. Brief. The kind of dialogue where the subtext drowns the sentence. Then a gunshot. Not on a street corner. Not in some club parking lot. In a van. Moving. Private. Quick. That's how Rich dies. No dramatic standoff. No final monologue. Just Alpo and a trigger and a decision no one can ever walk back. Later, Alpo will tell authorities he had no choice. That Rich was holding back money. That Rich was plotting against him. That betrayal had already begun. But here's the haunting part. Nobody knows if that's true. No proof. Just whispers and a body. And Harlem? Harlem doesn't take it well. When Rich's body is found, bullet holes in his head, tossed in the woods like a problem no one wanted to solve, the streets recoil. The disbelief is immediate. Not Rich. Anyone but Rich. The golden boy. The one who smiled more than he shouted. The one who looked out for people. The one who had a little brother people still light candles for. To this day, many people still think that Alpo didn't just kill Rich. He killed something sacred in Harlem's code. Something unspoken. A line that wasn't supposed to be crossed, no matter the money. So, what do you think? Can loyalty be erased by suspicion? Or does betrayal require something deeper? Something already broken? Back in his apartment, Alpo sits on the edge of his bed. He doesn't cry. He doesn't sleep. He just stares. Outside, the city buzzes. Sirens. Horns. Life moving forward. But inside that apartment, time pauses. The echoes of that van ride still playing like a scratched cassette, and the fallout begins. First, the streets. Friends disappear. Allies turn into shadows. Some pretend they don't know him. Others stop pretending altogether. Drug crews reshuffle. Territory lines blur. Harlem reabsorbs the pieces. Then come the whispers. Alpo did it. He killed Rich. And Alpo? He doesn't deny it. Not publicly. Not loudly. He just keeps moving. Flashy. Untouched. He buys new clothes. He eats at the same restaurants. He shows up like nothing happened. But he knows. He knows the silence that follows him is louder than applause. A mainstream fact. Rich Porter's funeral in 1990 drew crowds that overflowed into the streets. Hundreds came, young and old, not just to mourn, but to witness. His death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a moment, a break in Harlem's heart. And every face in that crowd wondered the same thing. Why? Alpo doesn't show up. Of course not. He stays away, even as Harlem glares in his direction. And slowly, something inside him begins to calcify. Not guilt. Alpo doesn't wear that shade. But something like detachment. Like acceptance that the line's been crossed and there's no going back. He starts changing his operations. Tightens his circle. Watches for faces in the shadows. Trust becomes a rumor he doesn't believe in anymore. But there's one thing he can't outrun. He's made himself a legend, and legends don't get days off. Even now, decades later, people still argue about that night. Was it business? Was it personal? Was it fear? What makes a man kill his best friend in the back of a van? In Alpo's world, sometimes the only way forward is through someone else's ending. And Rich's ending, it would follow Alpo forever, like a shadow that never fades. By now, Alpo's name doesn't just carry weight, it drags. Every step he takes through Harlem feels like it's tethered to something heavy and invisible. It's not guilt, at least not the kind most people would recognize. It's legacy, consequence, the shape of a reputation built too fast and fed too well. The streets change after Rich's death. Corners that once welcomed Alpo now shift when he pulls up. Eyes dart. Conversations trail off. It's subtle, but he notices. The warmth is gone. Even in the clubs, where his favorite songs still blare and the bottles keep coming, the toasts don't ring as loud. He can still command a room, sure, but it feels more like tolerated royalty than earned respect. Something's off, and Alpo, for all his bravado, is not stupid. So he does what any man in his position would do. He tightens his grip. The business doesn't stop. It never does. The money still flows, though slower now, thicker, like blood moving through arteries coated in suspicion. He starts cleaning house, cutting off associates, moving different. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia in this life isn't a weakness. It's a form of vision. One by one, he distances himself from the old crew. Too many mouths, too many rumors, and worst of all, too many people with stories. He knows how stories kill, so he leans into silence. Alpo begins communicating through middlemen. He stops showing up in person, uses runners. He doesn't touch product unless he has to. He stops driving flashy cars during the day, keeps the bikes, but rides them only at night. Even his outfits change. Fewer bold prints, more muted tones. He still wears jewelry, still smiles when it suits him. But the streets feel colder. There's a name whispered during this period, Apple Corps. Some say it was a safe house. Others say it was a stash spot in the Bronx, a place where Alpo kept his closest secrets. Whether it existed or not is debatable. But the idea of it? That somewhere, Alpo had a room full of names, numbers, and escape plans. It made people nervous. He liked that, a mainstream fact. During the early 1990s, federal task forces in New York and Washington, D.C. dramatically increased surveillance on drug organizations suspected of intercity operations. Alpo, with ties to both Harlem and D.C., was on several radars, officially and unofficially. The feds start circling. At first, it's just whispers. Agents asking questions, low-level guys getting pinched and pressured. But soon, it's louder. Surveillance vans, tapped phones. One kid from Alpo's crew gets picked up on a weapons charge and doesn't make bail. Another vanishes. Last seen outside a courthouse. Alpo doesn't panic. He prepares. He knows the game's shifting, so he sets his eyes elsewhere. Washington, D.C. To Alpo, Harlem is home. But D.C. is opportunity. New turf. New rules. A fresh start without the echoes. It's not about running away. It's about expansion. Diversifying. In his mind, this is a business decision, not an escape plan. But many people still think that leaving Harlem wasn't strategy. It was fear. So, what do you think? Can a king really move kingdoms? Or is the crown tied to the soil it was stolen from? Either way, Alpo packs up. Not everything. Just what matters. Some say he left behind stacks of money hidden in basements. Others claim he left coded ledgers in the walls of an old apartment building on 143rd. Probably not true. But with Alpo, maybe always feels like a coin balanced on its edge. he doesn't say goodbye to many people. One friend remembers a handshake on a rooftop. Alpo looked out over Harlem, quiet for once, then said, "I won't be back unless I got to." He didn't smile. He didn't look sad either. Just focused. Then he was gone. DC would become his next stage. But Harlem never stopped watching the space he left behind. Because once you kill a prince, you don't just leave the kingdom. You leave a silence shaped like your face. Washington, D.C. greets Alpo like it's seen his type before and knows exactly how the story ends. The capital has its own rhythm, its own hustle, its own deep, blood-stained history of street kings who rose fast and fell faster. But Alpo arrives not as a stranger. He steps into D.C. with Harlem still clinging to his jacket sleeves, the echo of Rich Porter's name never quite fading from his shoulder. He doesn't come in quiet. No, that's not Alpo's way. He rolls into the D.C. scene like a carnival pulled into town overnight. New cars, new outfits, bikes that roar down Georgia Avenue like parades in motion. His name hits the blocks before his product does. And the locals, they notice. Some are intrigued, others are insulted. Who is this fast-talking outsider, flashing Harlem money, acting like he invented the game? But here's the thing about Alpo. He doesn't ask for respect. He assumes it. Walks into rooms with that same smile, that same bravado, that same carefully rehearsed charm that once made Harlem pause. It works. For a while, he starts partnering with local names, guys like Wayne Silk Perry, a man known more for his silence than his words, and feared for the kind of violence that doesn't require announcements. Silk is a storm in waiting, a walking death warrant wrapped in DC street code. Alpo sees the value. Together, they form an uneasy alliance. Alpo with the product, the network, the charisma. Silk with the reputation, the muscle, and the ability to end a conversation without using verbs. And in DC, that works. Within months, Alpo's operation balloons. The structure is familiar. Runners, spotters, stash houses, coded language, multiple drop points. But the profits, exponential. Some say he was making $1 million a month at his peak in the capital. Maybe more. And this time, he's smarter. He watches everything, keeps tighter circles, fewer middlemen, more protocol. He's not interested in friendship. He's building a machine. A silent, grinding machine with just enough glitter to keep the spotlight turned toward the show and away from the screws holding it all together. But the streets? They're watching. DC may be newer turf, but it's not naive. It knows a rising star when it sees one, and it also knows gravity always waits. Locals begin murmuring. Some say he's reckless. Others say he's paranoid. A few whisper that he's becoming too powerful, too flashy, too unpredictable. Even Silk begins to shift, and that's when things start breaking. Again, one night, Alpo gets word that someone on his team might be snitching, not just to police, to feds. The kind of talking that ends empires, not just deals. He's furious. Paranoia grips his throat. Everyone becomes a suspect, and DC, already on edge, starts cracking at the seams. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the early 1990s, the DC area had one of the highest per capita murder rates in the US. The drug trade fueled much of that violence, with complex networks and deadly feuds between rival crews. Alpo dropped into that chaos like a match onto dry leaves. So what does he do? He leans into the only strategy he trusts. Control through fear. People start disappearing, not just enemies. Associates. People who've been close. People who know too much. Alpo doesn't blink. If trust is a question, silence becomes the answer. And every answer ends the same way. He believes he's staying ahead of the curve. But many people still think that this second empire, this DC chapter, was doomed the moment he brought his Harlem mentality south. So what do you think? Can a man really rewrite his story just by changing cities? Or does the ink travel with him, no matter how far he runs? Because even as the money grows, so do the shadows. Alpo starts riding around more cautiously, stops trusting even his closest crew. Rumors swirl that he's keeping kill lists in his head, running loyalty tests just to see who flinches. He tells people he's fine, that he's in control. But late at night, alone in those quiet apartments he rents under fake names, the silence feels heavier. It always does after the last laugh fades. Control is a slippery thing. You grip it tight, and it leaks between your fingers. You loosen your hold, and it vanishes completely. Alpo's grip in DC is still firm, for now, but it's getting messy. Too many fires flaring up, too many names whispered with caution, and worst of all, too many bodies. There's a pattern to the violence. Someone speaks out of turn? Gone. Someone takes too long to return a call? Vanished. Someone shows up late to a drop or gets too comfortable with their pockets heavier than expected? They stop showing up at all. It's not business anymore. It's fear management. Alpo's empire starts to look less like a company and more like a dictatorship. Silk Perry, who once rode beside him, now walks with hesitation. Their partnership, never truly built on trust, is fraying. Silk hears the murmurs too, that Alpo's moving different, that the next person on Alpo's list could be anyone, even him. And in DC, when a killer starts getting nervous, the city listens. Silk and Alpo, once the perfect storm of product and protection, begin circling each other. No open confrontation, just subtle shifts, late replies, missed meetings, side eyes. Street logic begins whispering that one of them won't survive the year, but Alpo's not hearing it. He still rides flashy, still plays loud, still performs, even if fewer people are clapping. There's a moment, one that people still talk about, where Alpo pulls up to a club in a custom-painted motorcycle jacket, lined with diamonds. Not rhinestones, diamonds. Just to walk inside, nod once, and leave. It wasn't about the attention, it was about the message. I'm still here, still untouchable, still Alpo. But what happens when your myth outgrows your means? Because behind the scenes, the federal government is no longer whispering, they're compiling. Every flashy car, every trip, every phone call, it's all being recorded. Agents build walls full of photos, maps, diagrams. Alpo's Harlem empire is already legendary, but now they want the DC chapter to close with handcuffs. They're watching his every move, and inside Alpo's crew, they're feeling it. He notices it in their eyes. The way they ask questions twice. The way they smile too fast. He starts watching them. Every conversation becomes a test. Every glance, an interrogation. Trust becomes a memory from a different lifetime, and still, he pushes forward. He shifts locations frequently, changes phone numbers like socks, keeps 3 different outfits laid out by the door, just in case he has to run. Paranoia becomes routine, and maybe, just maybe, that's what keeps him ahead for as long as he manages to stay free. A historical fact, the FBI and DEA, working together in the early 90s, launched coordinated operations across major cities to dismantle drug networks. Alpo Martinez became one of their highest priority targets, known for his cross-state operations and connections from New York to D.C. His file grew thicker by the month. Then comes the night of reckoning, It doesn't begin with sirens. It begins with a face. Someone inside his operation flips. Whether out of fear, leverage, or self-preservation, one of Alpo's close associates cuts a deal. It's quiet, deliberate, the kind of cooperation that ends legacies. And Alpo doesn't know yet. He's still making moves, still assuming his shadow stretches farther than the law can reach. Until the law shows up, not with a warning, but with a folder. Arrest, charges, conspiracy, murder. It happens fast, and yet not fast enough to surprise him. Because Alpo knew this was coming. You could feel it in the way he slowed down his entrances, the way he stopped laughing quite so hard, the way he kept his jacket zipped higher, like he was already preparing for cold steel. But many people still think he could have run, that he had time, that he had options. So what do you think? Was he waiting to be caught? Or did the weight of his past finally move faster than even he could outrun? He's taken into custody. No shootout, no high-speed chase, just handcuffs and a door that closes louder than expected. And for the first time in a long time, Alpo says nothing. There's a particular silence that follows a man like Alpo into custody. It's not peaceful. It's not calm. It's that strange, echoey quiet that comes after a fire's been put out, when the smoke still lingers and no one knows how bad the damage really is. Alpo sits in the cell like he's just waiting for a meeting. Not broken, not panicked, just still. His eyes roam the walls like he's measuring them, already mapping out angles, already rehearsing conversations he might never have. They bring him paperwork, charges that stack like bricks. Drug trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, multiple counts of murder. He doesn't flinch, not outwardly anyway. What the agents don't know, what maybe even Alpo hasn't fully admitted to himself, is that part of him expected this, maybe even welcomed it. When you build an empire on betrayal, silence, and style, eventually one of them turns on you. Still, prison is a new kind of war. Gone are the leather jackets, the roaring bikes, the admirers with wide eyes. Here, everything is regulation, metal, gray, hard edges and harder stares. And yet, even here, even behind bars, Alpo finds a way to keep his name alive. He talks, not to everyone, and never recklessly. But word begins to circulate. Alpo is considering cooperation. That sacred word in street code that opens doors in courtrooms but seals them in neighborhoods. Snitch, informant. It's whispered like a curse. At first, it seems impossible. Not Alpo, the man who moved with royalty, who stared down threats with a grin. But behind closed doors, the conversation is real. The charges are steep. Life without parole. Concrete forever. And Alpo, he does the math. Slowly, over days, maybe weeks, he begins negotiating. Details, names, timelines. He offers the feds stories like coins across a table. Some true, some embellished, some so specific they change cases that had gone cold for years. And the agents, they listen, because Alpo wasn't just a soldier. He was a general. He didn't just know who did what. He knew how they did it, who helped, who watched, who cleaned up the mess, and most importantly, who could still be charged. One by one, the pieces move. Alpo becomes a tool, a weapon for the prosecution. His cooperation leads to dozens of convictions. People go down, some guilty, some maybe just close enough to smell it. And in exchange, he gets a deal. Not freedom, not yet, but protection. Reduced time, witness relocation, the full alphabet soup. It's official. Alpo Martinez flips. A mainstream historical fact. Alpo's cooperation with federal authorities was instrumental in closing multiple high-profile cases, particularly involving Washington, D.C.-based drug organizations. His decision to testify marked one of the most controversial turns in the drug war narrative of the 1990s. Outside, the news spreads like an oil spill. People are stunned, disappointed, enraged. Some refuse to believe it. Others nod like they saw it coming. And in Harlem, there's silence again. But this time it's disgust. His name, once gold-plated, is now radioactive. Even those who once idolized him now spit his name like a sour taste. But many people still think he did what he had to. That the game, at some point, always ends in courtrooms and compromises. So, what do you think? Is survival a betrayal? Or is it just the final form of control? Alpo is moved. New name, new papers, new life. He fades from headlines, from photos, from the streets that once spoke his name like a prayer and a warning. But behind the scenes he watches. He knows what's being said. He reads the coded articles, the interviews, the documentaries. He watches the legends get retold and reshaped. And the part that stings most, he's no longer the hero, not even the villain. Just a cautionary tale. Inside his new cell, a quieter one, better food, no press. He sometimes stares at the wall and imagines the old streets. Wonders if anyone still thinks of him. Wonders if Rich's name still rings louder than his, and whether or not he'll ever get a chance to rewrite the ending. If a man's name can't go home, can he? Alpo fades into the folds of witness protection like ink, soaking into an old envelope. His name disappears from court documents. His file is sealed tight. His old aliases are discarded like cigarette butts on Harlem pavement. What remains is a shell with a new name, a new zip code, and a silence deeper than any prison yard. The program sends him north, Maine, of all places, where the air is cleaner, the nights quieter, and the accents so unfamiliar, they feel like a different language. To a man born in the heartbeat of Harlem, where every siren has a purpose and every bodega has a rhythm, Maine feels like the moon. But Alpo adapts. He always does. He gets a job. They say he worked construction. Others say delivery. Some claim he ran a car detailing service out of a rented garage. The truth is foggy, like most things in this part of his life. The one detail everyone agrees on? He didn't hide like most in witness protection do. No beard, no fake limp, no sunglasses and slumped posture. No, he walked like Alpo, even under a different name, and that's where things get strange. Because witness protection is designed for invisibility. But Alpo, he's never been good at quiet. Neighbors start to notice. The new guy in town who dresses just a little too sharp, talks just a little too slick, rides motorcycles in a town where most people drive pickup trucks. He becomes a curiosity, the kind of man you watch from your front porch, cup of coffee cooling in your hand. Rumors grow. Some say he told stories, bragged about his past. Nothing too direct, just enough to raise eyebrows. You know who I used to be? Smirk while fixing someone's brakes. A vague reference to the old days over a beer. Whether true or not, the effect is real. Alpo, or whoever he is now, becomes Maine's quietest loudmouth. His silence roars in how carefully he curates what he says. Just enough to make people wonder. Never enough to confirm. And yet he's lonely, because reinvention is a performance. And performances need audiences. Back in Harlem, his name resurfaces like an oil slick on calm water. Podcasts start digging into his legacy. Rappers drop his name again, sometimes in awe, sometimes in judgment. Documentaries pull old mugshots and grainy surveillance footage. Kids who weren't even born during his reign post his quotes under moody Instagram captions. And Alpo? He watches, quietly. He scrolls through those clips. Watches actors reenact scenes he lived. Smiles, maybe. Winces, maybe. No one knows. But it's said he kept tabs on everything. The culture that used him. The legends that outlasted him. The friend he killed. And then one day, he goes back to Harlem. Not loudly, not with a parade, but with presence. Word spreads that he's back riding around the old neighborhoods. Candy-colored Dodge truck. Same walk, same air. Same look, like he never left. Like he owns a place that no longer remembers how to fear him properly. People don't believe it at first. Alpo? Here? Isn't he dead? In jail? On an island somewhere? But he's real. Too real. One night, a teenager records a blurry video from a corner store parking lot. Alpo leaning against his truck, talking with someone, smiling like the street never betrayed him. The video makes its way online, and in hours, it spreads. He's back, and suddenly, all those ghosts he left behind begin shifting in their graves. A mainstream fact. Alpo Martinez was officially released from prison in 2015 after serving roughly 25 years. His relocation and identity were kept confidential under the U.S. Witness Protection Program. His reappearance in Harlem around 2020 stunned both law enforcement and the community, but many people still think he came back on purpose, that he wanted to be seen. So what do you think? Was Alpo looking for redemption? Nostalgia? Or did he just miss the feeling of his name in the air? Whatever the reason, he didn't hide. Not anymore. And somewhere beneath the layers of new IDs and sealed courtrooms, the old Alpo stirred once more. Still sharp, still haunted, still Alpo. You don't just return to Harlem, you announce your survival. Alpo knew that, even if he didn't say it outright. His actions did. That candy-red Dodge Ram he drove through the old neighborhoods wasn't about blending in. It was about reappearing with punctuation. Shiny, loud punctuation. The kind that leaves no doubt. Yes, it's me. And no, I'm not hiding. He parks on blocks that remember his footsteps. Walks past bodegas that once fed his crew. Stares down, stoops where his name was whispered with either awe or spit. The skylines changed, but the ground still murmurs with old stories. And the people, they watch. Some stare in disbelief, others look away. The younger crowd, raised on legend more than memory, aren't sure how to feel. Is this the man they've heard about? The guy from YouTube clips, grainy documentaries, scattered rap lyrics, or just some older dude trying to cosplay his former life? But for those who knew, the ones who remember the dirt bikes and the disappearances, the laugh that didn't always mean joy, they know exactly who's standing in front of them. Alpo doesn't move like a man afraid. He visits old haunts, eats in public, speaks to people like he's never been gone, never flipped, never buried a friendship in a moving van. But beneath it all, there's a tension, something barely contained. He keeps his back to the wall, never parks the truck the same way twice, always scans the crowd. Because legends don't get welcomed home. They get weighed. DC didn't follow him here, not in person. But the weight of what he did there still drags behind him like chains under the pavement. Silk Perry, still locked away. And stories of those Alpo implicated still circulate like bad omens. Harlem hasn't forgotten. It just hasn't had a reason to speak. Until now. One encounter becomes a turning point. He runs into an old associate outside a bodega. Not a close one, but close enough to remember. The man nods. Doesn't speak. Just holds the stare a moment too long. Alpo smiles, then keeps walking. But later that night, he moves locations. Again, because deep down, he knows forgiveness is a fantasy. In this city, you don't come back to applause. You come back to consequences waiting for a quiet moment. Here's your historical thread. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, several articles and interviews confirmed Alpo's reemergence in Harlem under his real name. Despite witness protection protocol, he discarded the anonymity, choosing familiarity over safety. Some say he was drawn back by nostalgia. Others believe he missed the energy, the way Harlem used to sing when he walked by. But many people still think he returned because he couldn't stand not being seen. So, what do you think? Was this the boldness of a man at peace, or the final act of someone who didn't want to die in obscurity? He rides around in that truck like it's armor, windows tinted, seat reclined, music low. Sometimes he doesn't even get out, just sits there, staring at old blocks like he's reading a love letter written in broken concrete. One night he stops at a light. Someone recognizes him. It's unclear what happens, only that voices were raised. Hands moved fast. And Alpo, for once, didn't speak back, just stared ahead. Later, he'd tell a friend, "Harlem don't owe me. I owe it nothing either. We're even." But Harlem doesn't forget its debts, especially not the unpaid ones, because every block has a memory, and every eye that sees him still moving, still breathing, still there, remembers who isn't. Rich, William, dozens more. The streets might be older now, might dress different, but their code hasn't aged. You don't betray the circle and ride back in expecting a seat, not unless you're asking for something. And maybe, just maybe, Alpo is. Sometimes ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt attention. And Alpo, he wasn't back in Harlem for peace. He was back for recognition, for volume. A man who once had the city memorizing his every move doesn't retire into obscurity. He reappears, louder in silence than he ever was in sound. But something's shifted. Harlem isn't applauding anymore. It watches from windows. Shadows twitch when his truck idles too long on a block. Conversations stall when he walks into a deli. Kids ask their uncles, "Is that really him?" And the uncles nod, but don't smile. You can feel it in the air, like a summer storm gathering. But the sky stays clear. He thinks he can manage it, that his charm, his presence, his sheer Alpo-ness can smooth over the jagged parts. He flashes familiar grins, talks about the old days, laughs loud at memories no one else laughs at anymore. He drops money at corner stores, tips well at diners, even gives advice to younger hustlers like he's still royalty. But every conversation leaves people colder than before, because there's no forgetting, no forgiving. You kill a prince, you don't get to rule again. And Alpo begins to sense it, though you'd never know from his posture. His tone stays breezy. His steps remain confident. But now, he parks closer to exits, keeps the truck running a little longer, stops answering questions with names. Some days, he wears a bulletproof vest under his hoodie. And at night, he's restless. Even the deep hum of Harlem, the traffic, the sirens, the occasional motorcycle tearing down Lenox doesn't lull him like it once did. The ghosts are louder now, Rich's voice especially, not as an accusation, just a presence, a reminder. He still plays the part, still dresses like someone with nothing to worry about. But inside, he knows this return isn't a second act. It's an ending waiting to pick its moment, and then it starts. The slashes on his truck tires, twice in 1 week. A beer bottle thrown at his window. Someone yells "snitch" from across 125th Street, and he doesn't turn his head. just keeps walking, slower than before. His phone buzzes with unknown numbers. One text says, "Not everyone's dead, Al." He doesn't respond. Can't. This isn't DC, where alliances were transactional and loyalty was paper thin. This is Harlem, where grudges grow roots, where kids grow up on legends that end in betrayal, where ghosts don't forgive. They just wait. Here's a historical tether. By 2021, Alpo Martinez had resumed a low-key presence in Harlem under his real name, despite previously being under witness protection. He was frequently seen in public, drawing attention, sparking controversy, and making many question why, after everything, he would come back at all. Many people still think he returned because the silence was too loud, that no matter what protection he had, he couldn't bear the thought of being forgotten. So what do you think? Is that bravery? Madness? Or just a man who never learned how to exist without being seen? Still, he doesn't leave. He visits the old corners, parks outside buildings he once paid rent for, if not in name, then in blood. He speaks to the younger crowd sometimes, offers war stories with no moral. One kid records him on his phone and posts it online. The caption reads, "OG Alpo still out here. Harlem different." The clip goes viral. And that's when Alpo finally starts to understand legends are currency, but only while they're dead. The moment you reappear, you're no longer a story. You're a target. There's a difference between being remembered and being reintroduced. Alpo learned that the hard way. See, when he was gone, the city had time to reshape his image. He was the cautionary tale, the Netflix documentary, the whispered warning. But now he was flesh again, walking the same streets, breathing the same air as those who remembered the blood he left behind. And Harlem, it was no longer interested in myth. It wanted justice. He begins to notice cars tailing him longer than they should, faces lingering a moment too long. A man across the street at 2 a.m., sitting in a running car with the headlights off. Normal people don't sit like that. Alpo knows. He invented that stillness, but he doesn't run. He doubles down. More appearances. More nights out. He lets himself be seen, like he's daring the city to make up its mind. Some say he even talked about doing interviews, a memoir, a tell-all. Whether that was real or just bravado leaking out of a bored afternoon, no one knows. But the mere thought of it, it rippled through the streets. You could feel the temperature change. Old crews, disbanded years ago, suddenly found reasons to meet again. Old wounds, healed badly, began to itch. And the younger generation, those raised on tales of Rich and Alpo, now had the chance to rewrite the ending. They were watching, and so were the feds. Word inside certain offices was that Alpo's reappearance had put former prosecutors on edge. If someone went after him now, it could blow open old investigations, witness lists, plea deals, the whole web. But there was nothing they could do unless he crossed another line. And Alpo? He stayed just shy of it. He'd walk up to old buildings where he once paid rent in silence. He'd nod at people he recognized, even if they didn't nod back. Some nights he'd pull over, sit in his truck for half an hour without doing anything, just watching. Once, a local says they saw him sitting in his car crying. Another says they saw him laughing into his phone. No one knows which version is true. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe that's always been the point with Alpo. He's whoever you need him to be to keep the story going. Still, the tension builds. The people closest to him, if any truly were, say he started wearing the vest every day now. Not just for show, not just for bravado, He knew it was coming. Maybe not the day, but definitely the event. And then came Halloween, October 31st, 2021. A Sunday night. Cool air. Streets full of kids in costumes, candy wrappers skittering along curbs. Somewhere, someone plays an old Big L record too loud. Somewhere else, someone checks the locks twice before going to bed. And on Frederick Douglass Boulevard, Alpo is driving his Dodge Ram. Same truck, same shade of red. He's alone. No bodyguards, no crew, no cameras. Just him, riding down a street he once controlled like a throne on wheels. Then, gunshots, 5 of them. No time for speeches. No cinematic standoff. Just glass shattering and metal folding and history collapsing into the steering wheel. Alpo tries to drive, wounded, bleeding, adrenaline fighting with gravity. He makes it a few blocks before the truck crashes. Slams into parked cars near 147th Street. The people who find him say his eyes were still open. But the lights? Gone. A historical fact. On October 31st, 2021, Alberto Alpo Martinez was shot and killed while driving through Harlem. He was 55. His death, though long feared, still shocked the community, closing a chapter that many believed would never truly end, and many people still think he knew it was coming. That returning to Harlem wasn't a mistake. It was a farewell. So, what do you think? Was his end written by fate or by hands that never forgot? Because in Harlem, nothing stays buried, not even ghosts. The street where Alpo's truck came to a stop doesn't look like the end of a legend. It's ordinary. Lined with parked cars, dim streetlights, a laundromat on the corner still buzzing with fluorescent light. But on that Halloween night, it became a closing paragraph, written in engine smoke and spilled memory. The Dodge Ram is wrecked. Its red paint now shadowed by bullet holes and the dented silence of bystanders who knew better than to speak first. Some say he tried to call someone. Others say he was dead before the truck hit the car in front of him. The coroner's report later confirmed multiple gunshot wounds to the torso and head. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. Didn't matter. A ghost doesn't get to choose how it exits, only how long it haunts before someone finally turns the lights out. The city doesn't mourn him with banners or murals. No candlelight vigils. No public processions. Instead, Harlem reacts the way you'd expect it to when a man dies who once betrayed its heartbeat. It exhales, quietly, long, deep, like it had been holding its breath since 1990. News spreads fast. Faster than it ever could during Alpo's heyday. Social media lights up. Tweets, videos, Instagram slideshows, breaking news, overlays that feel both surreal and inevitable. Some say, good riddance. Others, mostly younger voices, shaped by documentaries, not memories, post tributes, shocked by how the legend ended. But those who lived through it? Who remember Rich, remember the trial, remember the way Harlem changed? They mostly stay quiet, because what is there to say? The king returned and was unseated by history itself. No jury, no press conference, just a few seconds of silence, broken by 5 loud truths. Here's the twist. Alpo didn't die in hiding. He didn't rot away in a prison cell, forgotten and irrelevant. He died doing what he always did, drawing eyes, turning corners, believing himself too big to fall. And many people still think that was the plan all along, that maybe he came back not to reclaim anything, but to be erased on his own terms. So what do you think? Can a man whose name echoed through Harlem for decades write his own ending simply by showing up and waiting? After his death, the city moves on, slowly, carefully. His body is taken away, the truck towed, the scene washed clean like rain over old graffiti. But something lingers. Not blood, not noise, just memory. The kind that sticks to old bricks. In barbershops, his name is spoken differently now. lower, less bravado, more caution. Because no matter how the story ends, the story still warns. Alpo's story wasn't about loyalty or survival or even betrayal. It was about legacy and what happens when you outlive the legend you helped build. And so, as the city softens into sleep, another Harlem night, another headline, another name faded into the rhythm of the concrete, we ease towards stillness. The lights in the bodegas dim. The last trains rattle under the city's skin, and a soft hum from a window fan carries outward, dissolving into the air. Let it carry you too. Breathe in, breathe out. He's gone now. You can rest. The name Alpo doesn't fade quietly. It lingers. Even after the red truck is hauled away and the headlines cool, the questions remain. Not about how he died, that's obvious, but why he returned and what it really meant. In Harlem's collective memory, Alpo becomes two people, the myth and the man. The kid who once turned staircases into strategy sessions, who rode dirt bikes like war horses through the city, who sold dreams wrapped in gold chains, and the man who came back when he shouldn't have, when the story had already closed its covers and moved on. And now he's a conversation. Did you hear how he died? I saw him once outside the fish spot. My uncle said he was going to write a book. Every voice adds something, real or imagined. He's no longer a person, he's a prompt. And in that way, Alpo gets exactly what he always wanted. He's still being talked about. In the days after his death, the whispers grow louder. Some believe he was trying to make amends, that his return was a quiet act of penance, an attempt to walk the streets again and offer peace in silence. Others are more cynical. They say he couldn't stand irrelevance. That being invisible in Maine felt more like dying than anything bullets could offer, but many people still think his death was inevitable. Not fate exactly, but the closing of a loop that had been spinning since that van ride with Rich Porter. So what do you think? Can time ever soften what betrayal hardens? The law, in its cold language, doesn't speak to legacies. The NYPD confirms the identity. The media runs a few retrospectives. Former drug kingpin Alpo Martinez shot in Harlem. Clickable, consumable, but not real to those who knew the noise behind the headlines. One man writes a blog post, remembering how Alpo once handed him a $100 bill on his 15th birthday, just for holding a door open. I know what he did, the man writes, but I still remember the smile, and that's the tension. Alpo was always smiling, even when he wasn't supposed to be, even when the room got quiet, even when everyone else had walked away. That smile confused people. Was it guiltless, or did it hide a grief no one ever saw? In a strange twist, his story begins reaching new ears. A younger generation, unfamiliar with the trauma, unscarred by the fallout, starts discovering him through clips and interviews. They wear his quotes on shirts, share edited videos over trap beats. The myth regenerates, and slowly, uneasily, Alpo becomes a mirror. To some, he reflects ambition. The kid who built an empire before he could legally drink. To others, he reflects a warning. What happens when charisma outruns conscience? And to Harlem, he's a scar. He reminds the city of its most painful contradictions. Brilliance and betrayal, love and violence, youth and ruin. You can feel it in the silence outside his old building, in the empty stairwell where his footsteps used to echo, in the wall where they say Rich once leaned, laughing. No plaque, no morale, just quiet, because for all the volume he brought in life, Alpo's echo now is softer, less about who he was and more about what he left behind. Courtrooms once held Alpo's name like a live wire, dangerous to touch, but impossible to ignore. Now, in the aftermath of his death, those same halls grow quiet. No new charges, no new witnesses, just a case file marked closed and memories stacked like paper in forgotten drawers. But outside the system, the trial continues. On sidewalks, in group chats, on stoops under flickering lights. Everyone has their version, their verdict. He was a snake. He was a genius. He got what was coming. He changed the game. It's the kind of posthumous chatter that follows men who mattered, even if they mattered for the wrong reasons. And Alpo, he mattered, not just because he moved weight, not just because of the betrayal, but because he made everybody talk, whether they wanted to or not. The irony? Alpo was more dangerous as a ghost than he ever was in person. In life, you could watch him, anticipate him, read his mood. But in death, he's uncontrollable. His story bends, twists, resurfaces with new flavor depending on who's telling it. Podcasts release multi-part series. Former associates give interviews, some hiding their faces, others too proud to. YouTubers drop timelines with moody background music and grainy photos. Journalists revisit the old clippings. Books get reprinted. Rap lyrics name-check him again. The ghost is loud, and the courtroom of public memory is full. Somewhere in upstate New York, a retired detective sips coffee and sees Alpo's face on the news. He turns off the TV, mutters, "Should have stayed gone," and walks outside into the snow. Somewhere in D.C., a man who used to ride with Alpo sees the headlines and tightens his jaw. He doesn't say anything, just sits with the weight of things never forgotten. And somewhere in Harlem, a boy rides a dirt bike through the same alley Alpo once used to practice his getaways. The boy doesn't know the full story, just the silhouette, because that's what remains now. Silhouettes. The full figure, the man, the facts, all too complicated, too bloodied, too layered in pain. So people reduce him to shape. The flashy kingpin, the infamous traitor, the charismatic killer. Pick one. Pick all. That's the curse of becoming a symbol. And here's the twist that no one quite expected. Some still admire him. Not the snitch part, not the rich porter part, but the ambition, the myth of it, the way he took nothing and made it loud. Because in a world that often leaves young men invisible, Alpo refused to go unnoticed. He forced the world to look. And now that he's gone, many people still think he never really wanted to live forever, just to be remembered louder than the silence that raised him. So what do you think? Is infamy a kind of immortality? The courts may have stopped asking questions, but Harlem hasn't, because there's no verdict on a legend, only stories. And the stories? They're just getting started. Alpo's shadow stretches across generations like a stain that never fully lifts. Not because people agree on who he was, but because they don't. And in that argument, in that constant tug between memory and myth, he stays alive. You'll find him in barbershops, mentioned casually in the middle of a sports debate. Yeah, he was fast with it, but not Alpo fast. You'll find him on playlists. His name dropped between metaphors by rappers who never met him, but feel the weight of his name like borrowed armor. You'll find him in the pause before someone tells a Harlem story, because his legend is laced through the pavement like old wiring. You don't always see it, but when the lights flicker, you know it's still there. Some people try to clean the myth. They say, he was young, he didn't have a choice. He played the game everyone else played. He just played it better. Others snarl at that idea. Don't make excuses for him. He killed rich. He chose this. And then you have the quiet ones. The ones who don't argue. Who just shake their heads and sip their coffee and let the noise roll on. Because they were there. They remember. And remembering is heavier than arguing. A mainstream fact. After his release, and especially after his death, Alpo became the subject of dozens of cultural deep dives, both academic and street level. His case was studied in law classes, discussed in sociology programs, and analyzed as a cautionary tale of ego, survival, and systemic collapse. What fascinates most is not what he did, but how comfortably he moved through every stage, From corner kid to drug lord, from killer to cooperator, from ghost to street sighting, from myth to memory. He wore every version like a tailored suit, and people noticed. The duality of Alpo Martinez isn't rare in history, but it's rare in clarity. His life was so well documented, so media-friendly, so loud, that it forces even his harshest critics to pause and ask, what made him different? Some say it was timing. He rose when Harlem was at war with itself, when crack turned neighbors into lookouts and friends into competitors. Others say it was his mouth. Alpo didn't just make moves, he broadcasted them. Even his betrayals had showmanship. His court testimony, his interviews from prison, the way he framed himself not as a villain, but a man with no choice. Then there are those who say the difference was charm, that Alpo was magnetic, that he made you want to believe him, even as your instincts told you not to. That's what made him dangerous, because the most lethal blade is the one that laughs with you first. And many people still think Alpo's return to Harlem was his final bet, that he knew death was waiting, but if he could make the city look him in the eyes one more time, he'd win. So what do you think? Is legacy worth the risk? In his final months, Alpo was said to have talked about writing something down. Memoirs, maybe. Not to clear his name, just to set the record straight. Whether those pages exist, no one knows. Maybe they're locked in a drawer somewhere. Maybe they never existed. Maybe he said that just to keep the myth warm. But the truth, his story doesn't need a book. It's already written. In chalk outlines, in barbershop debates, in YouTube thumbnails, in the awkward silences when someone says Rich Porter's name and no one wants to say the next one. It's already alive. You can almost feel it. That strange weight in the air when a name outlives the body that carried it. Alpo is no longer a man, but a mood, a question mark, a lightning rod. In Harlem, his story doesn't just sit quietly in history. It pokes, it reminds, it unsettles. One night, a local artist tags a mural not far from where Alpo was killed. It's not his face, just a gold chain coiled into the shape of a question mark. No signature, no caption. It lasts 3 days before it's painted over, but the conversation it starts, still going. A group of teens outside a deli argue over it. One says, he was a genius. Another says, he was a coward. An older man leaning against the wall just mutters, he was both, and walks away. That's how it goes now. Nobody can agree on what Alpo was, only that he was something that never sat right, and it spreads beyond Harlem. In D.C., his name still lands heavy. People remember the sudden rise, the Silk partnership with Wayne Perry, the trail of bodies left behind. You can walk through certain neighborhoods there and still find someone who saw him once. Maybe at a club, maybe at a red light, maybe in court. They speak of him with a mix of fascination and nausea, like someone who watched a fire consume a building they used to live in. In prison yards, his name still comes up in low tones. In classrooms, his story is sometimes taught under urban sociology or criminal psychology. Case studies. Students who weren't alive during his reign now write essays on the ethics of informants. Some defend him, others rip him apart. But no one ignores him, and that's the thing. For a man who was silenced, Alpo is still being heard, even now. Here's your historical footnote. Several documentaries released in the years following Alpo's death examined not just his criminal empire, but the culture surrounding his myth. Many pointed to the complicated ways communities process betrayal, justice, and survival, especially when all three wear the same face. One former associate, interviewed anonymously, said this: he taught us to dream bigger than the block, but he also taught us to never trust anyone who smiles too much. That line stuck. It ended up quoted on murals, blog titles, TikToks, even tattooed on someone's forearm. Not because it's profound, but because it's true. Even now, Alpo's smile survives him. That slightly crooked grin, equal parts disarming and calculating. You could see it in courtrooms, in grainy club footage, even in the last video where he's leaning against the Dodge Ram, the streetlights painting him in shadow. He knew what it did to people, and maybe that's what made him most dangerous. Not the drugs, not the murders, not the betrayal, but the fact that people wanted to believe him, even when they knew better. Many people still think Alpo was a mirror, that he reflected exactly what you hope to see. Ambition, escape, wealth, toughness, strategy. But look long enough, and you'd see something colder, something honest in a way that was hard to swallow. So what do you think? Can a man be both villain and victim? Can betrayal be part of brilliance? The debates rage on, and while the world moves forward, Alpo's shadow doesn't shrink, it stretches. Every time someone rewatches Paid in Full, every time a corner kid stares at a fast car and thinks, maybe I could. Every time someone types his name into a search bar and falls into the rabbit hole of who he was and what he cost. Because stories like his, they don't end, they echo. There's something unsettling about a name that refuses to stay buried. Alpo's is like that, a sound that echoes off buildings long after the music's gone, that shows up in places it has no business being. Not just in Harlem, not just in DC, but everywhere that ambition comes faster than wisdom. And one place it keeps surfacing, the music. It's not always direct. Sometimes it's coded, a lyric about betrayal, a reference to a flashy comeback, a line about ghosts that smile too much. Rappers drop his name like punctuation, half admiration, half warning. Don't pull an Alpo, you move like Poe. Like Rich, I keep my circle tight. No Alpo. Some of them were toddlers when he was sentenced. Others weren't born yet. But the name travels, passed down through verses, documentaries, whispered stories at bus stops and barbershops. It's lore now, and lore, once it becomes music, never fades. Back in Harlem, the older heads hear it and shake their heads. One man, pushing 60, tells a younger cousin, "They keep saying his name like it's a brand." That ain't a brand, son. That's a body count. But it doesn't stop, because Alpo's story checks all the boxes of myth, rise, betrayal, exile, return, and death. A Shakespearean arc playing out over 30 years of drug corners and designer jackets. The fact that it's real only makes it more powerful. And the truth? Harlem never really settled how it feels about him. Some wanted him to rot. Others were curious. Some were scared. But most were just tired. Tired of seeing old ghosts resurface like Harlem was cursed to never rest. Tired of watching the news show mugshots with gold chains. Tired of seeing young boys get dazzled by stories that always end the same way. Blood and silence. Still, his return had meaning. Alpo didn't just come back physically. He came back into conversation, into argument, into memory. And many people still think he wanted to be judged, that his reappearance was a dare, a final performance before the curtain dropped. So what do you think? Can you control the way your story ends if you walk straight into it? Because the night he died, something changed in Harlem. Not just fear, not just closure, but clarity that legends, no matter how loud, don't get immunity. The streets may honor myth, but they don't forgive reality. Here's a mainstream thread. In the weeks after Alpo's death, local podcasts and community forums exploded with commentary. Some dissected his final days like a case file. Others mocked him. A few offered measured analysis of trauma, ego, and systemic failure. But one thing unified them all. No one said he didn't deserve it, not even those who once admired him. And that's the final wound in his story. He came back for presence, but was met with verdict. His life had been all volume, but his ending? Decided in whispers. You can still visit the street where it happened. The intersection's the same. Cars roll past. Kids walk by. But if you pause, even for a second, and let the quiet settle, you'll hear it. Not a voice, not a scream, just a hum, like the city exhaled, and then remembered what silence tastes like. You'd think that after all that, the city would move on. But Harlem doesn't let go like that. It's not built to forget. It's built to remember quietly, through glances, through changed routes, through the silence between certain names and conversation. So when Alpo returned, he didn't just spark gossip. He reopened a wound, and the city responded the only way it knew how, by watching. Watching the streets he parked on, watching the diners he entered, watching the people who talked to him and wondering if they'd forgotten everything. Because familiarity is dangerous in a city with memory. He tried to reclaim old paths. You'd see him drifting slowly down the avenues, that red Dodge Ram catching light like an omen. People wouldn't wave. Some nodded, sure, out of reflex, out of shock. But no one reached out. He wasn't welcome, and he knew. But here's the thing about Alpo. He didn't return to be welcomed. He returned to be seen. For years, he was a ghost, sealed away in witness protection, stripped of his name, his swagger, his Harlem. To him, that was death. So when he came back, it wasn't about safety. It was about resurrection. Let them stare, let them whisper, let them wonder why he had the nerve to come back at all. He wore it like a badge, but Harlem doesn't pin medals on ghosts. People still walked the same corners he once ruled, but they walked past him. When he spoke, he could feel how shallow his voice fell. No echo, no reach. The young ones didn't know him. The old ones didn't trust him. Legacy, it turns out, has a half-life. The neighborhoods had changed. Gentrification swept up the edges. Coffee shops replaced check-cashing spots. Rent climbed. New storefronts went up where corners once held memorial candles. And yet, Alpo remained the constant variable. Same stride, same attitude, like a mixtape that refuses to age out of rotation. Until that Halloween night, after the gunshots faded and the truck sat steaming against another car, there was a pause. An eerie, echoing moment where Harlem just stood still. No sirens yet, no screams. Just the city, realizing that an era had truly ended. And many people still think that's why no one shouted, because Harlem had already mourned him. Twice. Once when he killed Rich, once when he flipped. This third time, it wasn't mourning, it was confirmation. So what do you think? Can a man be buried 3 times? Once by betrayal, once by prison, and once by his own return? Because Alpo's legacy didn't die with him. It just stopped asking for permission. In the days that followed, no murals went up. No block was renamed. There were no public tears, no candle vigils that made the evening news. Just quiet. People passed the corner where he was shot and nodded once, like you do when walking past a place that means more than it says. Someone left a single rose under the street sign. No note, no name, just the gesture. And maybe that was the truest tribute of all. Not forgiveness, not hatred, just recognition of a man who once shook Harlem by the collar and then came back to ask if anyone remembered. They did. They always would. They just weren't going to clap. On paper, it was just another homicide. 5 shots, 1 victim, a red truck riddled with holes. Halloween night, Harlem. Another statistic added to a city already exhausted by violence. But the papers knew better. So did the people. This wasn't random. This wasn't reckless. This was return fire. 30 years delayed. The NYPD issued a short statement. The press ran headlines like, Harlem drug lord Alpo Martinez killed in drive-by shooting. Infamous informant gunned down in old neighborhood. The coverage came and went, like weather. fast-moving, loud for a moment, then gone. But in Harlem, the air didn't clear, because when Alpo died, he left behind more than just a wrecked vehicle and a bullet-riddled vest. He left unfinished sentences. People began revisiting old conversations. Names that had collected dust were spoken again. Some with venom, some with awe, some with both. The man had been gone for decades, but he'd never really left their vocabulary. And now that he was dead, he was everywhere. The most surreal part? He had predicted it, not on record, not in any grand final monologue, but in the way he moved those last weeks, visiting corners like old friends, watching the skyline like it whispered to him. He knew, even if he didn't say it aloud, his posture did, and so did his eyes. They weren't scanning for enemies anymore. They were memorizing, taking one last look. A mainstream fact. When Alpo returned to Harlem, many speculated that he was in violation of his witness protection agreement. Authorities never confirmed whether he was officially removed from the program, but by the time of his death, he was openly using his real name and living without apparent security measures. Many people still think this wasn't carelessness. It was intention. So what do you think? Did he return because he thought he could outrun the consequences? Or because he was done running? The night after his murder, the block where it happened remained unusually still. No balloons, no teddy bears, no murals drawn in chalk. Just a few murmured conversations and some wary eyes watching the street. One local, an older woman who had lived on the same block for 40 years, told a reporter, "That wasn't a killing, that was a response." And Harlem didn't argue, because in this city, memory moves in cycles. People remember how he left, and they remember who never came back after him. Rich Porter's name was whispered louder in the days following Alpo's death. It became the true eulogy. Not Alpo's life, but Rich's. Like the city had waited 3 decades to grieve properly, and now, finally it could. But closure is a funny thing. It doesn't come with headlines or press conferences. It comes with space, with the absence of a name that once filled so much room. And that space, it's loud. In its own way, it hums, not in celebration, not in sadness, but in something colder, something resolved. Alpo returned a legend and left a silence, the kind that tells you the streets have long memories, and even longer patience. There's a stillness that follows legacy, not the respectful kind, but the kind that walks on tiptoes, unsure whether to speak or let the dust settle. After Alpo's death, Harlem didn't break out in song or rage. It just adjusted, subtly, as if the city itself needed to exhale something it had been holding for far too long. The truck was towed, the sidewalk washed, the news cycle moved on. But for those who lived under the weight of his decisions, the silence was its own kind of reckoning. In the days that followed, a few familiar faces resurfaced. People who hadn't been seen in years now stood in doorways or sat on milk crates near corner stores, speaking low about old things. It wasn't nostalgia, it was autopsy, picking apart choices, recalling who disappeared when, measuring where Alpo's path crossed theirs, and how close they came to being part of his story. A few wore quiet relief on their faces. One man, who never gave his name, leaned on a brick wall and said, he wasn't supposed to last this long, and he knew it. That's the part that stuck, because if anyone understood the lifespan of loud men in quiet cities, it was Alpo. He wasn't just a hustler. He was a hustler who talked, who grinned when he should have grimaced, who came back to Harlem not as a ghost hoping to stay invisible, but as a reminder. And maybe that's what the streets rejected most. Not his crimes, not even the snitching, but the performance of it. Harlem didn't want the show anymore. It wanted rest. Alpo's presence was like flicking on the overhead lights in a dim jazz club. It ruined the mood, exposed the wrinkles, reminded everyone of what was lost, not what was possible. A historical thread, In the months after Alpo's murder, law enforcement made no immediate arrests, no suspects, no motive confirmed. The silence was, in many ways, louder than justice. And to Harlem, that silence was justice. Many people still think that was the plan, that the city didn't need a conviction, just conclusion. So what do you think? Is closure something a courtroom gives, or something a block decides? 1 year after his death, there's no plaque, no documentary premiere, no t-shirts. A few blogs mark the anniversary. Some podcasters revisit his story. But in Harlem, life moves forward without fanfare. The kids who never knew him ride their bikes past the exact spot without hesitation. They don't slow down. And that's the most profound goodbye of all. The world Alpo built no longer exists. The corners have new kings. The hierarchy has shifted. His name still stirs when spoken, but less now. Each mention feels more like history than threat. In barbershops, when his name is brought up, it's followed by a shrug, a pause, a lesson maybe. Don't be him, someone says. Don't try to be him. Because in the end, he didn't win. He just lasted longer than expected. And when the city took him back, it didn't do it with love. It did it with completion. The red Dodge Ram is long gone. The scene has been scrubbed. But the afterimage remains, burned into Harlem's muscle memory, like the echo of a shot you weren't there to hear, but somehow still feel. And in the aftermath, a strange kind of calm settles in. Not peace, not justice, just the absence of noise. In a city that never truly forgets, forgetting becomes an act of will. And yet, somehow, it begins. Alpo's story starts to drift. Not disappear, just drift. A few blocks away from where he died, a boy leans against a stoop, scrolling through his phone. He stumbles on a clip. Alpo talking in an old interview. Grainy, slightly pixelated. The man is smiling, recounting something wild. The kid listens, amused, confused. He doesn't know the context, doesn't feel the weight. He watches the clip the way you'd watch any other larger-than-life personality. Entertaining, curious, almost fictional. And that's what's happening now. Alpo is being pulled from the realm of the real and slowly packaged into the world of character. Like Billy the Kid, like Jesse James, like all the men who moved fast, died faster, and left behind names that sounded better in retellings. His edges get smoothed, his facts get rearranged. His smile becomes more iconic than tragic, because time has a way of forgiving what memory won't. Still, some guard the truth. Older voices, street historians, men who were there. They refuse to let him become folklore without consequence. They correct the kids when they get it wrong. They lean in when someone romanticizes too hard. Don't forget what he did. Don't forget who paid the price. That's the balance now. 1 part legacy, 1 part ledger. And Harlem? It walks that line every day. Here's a quieter detail. A few years before his return, Alpo had been spotted in biker gear in the Northeast. Helmet on, visor down, no smile, just motion. And for a while, that was how people imagined him, blurred behind speed. Somewhere else, story paused, but he couldn't stay there. He came back, not just physically, but narratively. He couldn't let his last act be silence, and many people still think that was the final flaw. That the man who survived the streets, the betrayals, the feds, and even the courtroom chose to walk back into the one place that couldn't forget. So what do you think? Was it arrogance? Nostalgia? Or did he finally realize that the only way to control the story was to end it in the place it started? Either way, Harlem doesn't dwell. The building facades age. The new generation grows. The city pulses forward. But in certain corners, If you pause just long enough, you'll still catch pieces of him. In a kid riding a dirt bike across Lenox at full speed. In a man adjusting his gold chain in the window reflection. In the pause between Rich Porter and you-know-who, the myth survives. But the man? He's gone. Not just from life, but from the script he once wrote. And for the first time in a long time, Harlem's stage is empty. What remains of Alpo Martinez isn't buried in a grave. It's scattered in the retellings, in the folded corners of yellowing newspapers, in shaky YouTube documentaries stitched together with dramatic voiceovers, in verses from rappers who never met him, but felt his name echo like a beat drop between betrayal and ambition. He's not here, but his shadow moves. Sometimes in casual conversation, "You're moving like Alpo" still stings, still lands heavy. Sometimes in memory, where he's frozen in mid-laugh, mid-lie, mid-loyalty test, always on the edge of control, always wearing that crooked grin like it was stitched into his face. The name doesn't carry the same fear anymore. It carries weight, but not the kind that clears rooms, more the kind that slows conversations, like a scar someone doesn't want to explain. In D.C., a few people still recall the days he reigned in silence. The ones who survived, who changed cities, who watched friends vanish when they got too close to his orbit. They don't talk about him for long. Too many names still tied to his. Too many things never said out loud. In Harlem, the silence is firmer, more resolved. You can walk the block where the truck crashed and feel nothing. No monument, no flowers, no tribute, just the hum of traffic, the murmur of life returning to its rhythm. Kids chasing after basketballs, someone selling incense on the corner, a man sweeping the sidewalk like he's trying to erase the past. And maybe that's what Harlem needed all along. Not closure, but quiet. Not justice, but absence. Because for years, Alpo's story dominated the air. Loud, complicated, contagious. He was the example, the excuse, the explanation. A walking contradiction dressed in designer belts and bulletproof fabric. But death changed that. Death made room, not for forgiveness, but for distance. Here's your wind down. On cool nights, with the fan humming low and the lights dimmed just enough, his story feels less like a biography and more like a fable. The kind you tell softly. The kind that ends in a question, not a moral. Was he a genius? A traitor? A victim? Or just a man who got everything he wanted, except peace? Many people still think he planned it that way. That he knew legends don't retire. They vanish, then reappear just long enough to remind you who they were. So what do you think? Can a man outrun himself if he's the one riding the chase? Now, let the noise fade. Let the city sleep. Let the story finally set. You've heard the rise, the betrayal, the exile, the return. And now, the hush. Because sometimes, the most haunting part of a legacy isn't the name. It's the quiet it leaves behind. Now take a deep breath. Let the corners of the city go still. Let the weight drop from your chest. The streetlights are dimming. The ghost is gone. And you can finally rest.